What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic, and in today's video, we're going to get a little rumory. We're going to get a little, I'm not going to say conspiratorial.
This name keeps coming up over and over again. Every day, Pepe's mail's getting sent back to me.
But looking at maybe there's some breadcrumbs as to what might be replacing Rip Ride Rockit in Universal Studios Florida. And that rumor, or I suppose just looking at some of the breadcrumbs that are being left by Universal, is that potentially Ghostbusters may be replacing Rip Ride Rockit.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
As the new roller coaster going in here. And there is some evidence to point to on this. So we're going to go through and talk about this. WDWNT actually has an article on this. And what it stems from is this sign right here. Now, the ride isn't closing until August 18th, but there are construction walls up, presumably for construction crews to get things prepped and ready to go for the replacement of this. But on the signage of the construction wall, it says Historic Preservation Act, Save New York's Treasures, Restoration of Historic Engine 89 Firehouse. It says this project is being funded in part by the generous support of the Casey Foundation and administered by the Midtown Park Service. Now, why this indicates Ghostbusters. So around these construction walls, which are through the firehouse facade in front of the New York Public Library facade, both buildings are inspired by Ghostbusters locations, and the firehouse was originally the entrance to the Ghostbusters Spooktacular show. And for those that may not know, it is a former show at Universal Studios Florida based on the Ghostbusters franchise, and the show permanently closed in 1996 and got replaced by Twister, Ride It Out, and then later on, Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon replaced that. And there are tributes in Rip Ride Rockit to this as well. So the building for the 89 fire station still remains in Universal's New York area and is passed through by the Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit. The fire chief is mentioned as Michael Moorman, who played Winston in the attraction. And another window is for paranormal travel agent Thomas E. Macht, I believe is how you say that. And this image here is what that looked like back when it was the Spooktacular show. So this could be somewhat of an Easter egg, perhaps, that Ghostbusters could be returning, given that they used to be in this firehouse. And this sign here is talking about the restoration of the historic Engine 89 firehouse.
Interesting.
Yes, thank you.
And also, Universal themselves, on June 6th, had this post. It says, "We ain't afraid of no ghosts. Read about the Ghostbusters legacy through the years at Universal Orlando Resort." And in that article, they just talk about the history of the Ghostbusters in this area, which if you are going to set up a return of Ghostbusters, it would make sense that you would go through here and lay out the history of this to kind of start educating people about what used to be there, because some people may not be aware that this area of the park used to be related to Ghostbusters. And on top of that, you have Ghostbusters that are part of the mega movie parade going on at Universal Studios this summer. And this is their part of the parade here, where you have the Ghostbusters car, you have the Marshmallow Man. Like, it's a cool looking float. And obviously, with this parade and last summer, they've been really leaning into the nostalgia of the 80s and 90s. Back to the Future has been a big property as well. And I look at all this and I think that it's not nothing, in that you know, it's known that Ghostbusters was here. Rip Ride Rockit is going away. They haven't said what is replacing it. And one of the things, I think the general consensus amongst most people and things that I have heard is that it'll likely would be Fast and Furious, as they are getting a Fast and Furious coaster out in Hollywood. And the often panned Fast and Furious Supercharged is not a popular attraction, but it is presumed that Universal does want to have a Fast and Furious element in their parks, given the success of that franchise. So it could make sense to do a similar type of coaster in terms of not the track itself, but maybe how it operates, like a drift coaster that they're doing out there. Put it in Universal Studios Florida as well, and then get rid of Supercharged, because you're not going to have two Fast and Furious properties in the same park. But the thing that I've said all along that would be a challenge, or something that would go against that, is the fact that Rip Ride Rockit in this area, and they're going to have a building over here by this firehouse, is that it's in a New York area, and Fast and Furious is not based in New York. It's based out in California. Not that you couldn't get around that with storytelling. It's very easily that you could. But now this popping up, the timing of the post, given that the fact that Universal is leaning more into nostalgia, it could be nothing. It could just be a little nod to the fact that Ghostbusters used to be here and kind of playing into that. And with Mega Movie Parade going on this summer, it could be that. Undoubtedly, it very well could. It also could be an Easter egg that Ghostbusters is going to be the theme of this new coaster going in here. And given the fact that Universal is very heavily leaning into nostalgia, again, with the parade, with Sensational at night, and then you look at over in the Universal Studios UK park that they're building, they are doing a Back to the Future land in that park. And you've also got the Universal Fan Fest out in Universal Studios Hollywood that heavily featured Back to the Future, which has been basically the cornerstone of that event. I think if you're looking at Universal's perspective of trying to see where the fan base is with some of these retro properties, I think it's been proven pretty well that there is a lot of enthusiasm for this. But they obviously are not afraid to lean into the nostalgia of this. And given the popularity of the Mega Movie Parade and everything last summer, I think that the nostalgia of Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, Beetlejuice, like you've seen these not only in movies, but in the theme parks be something that's very popular with the fan base. Now, what ultimately ends up being the replacement for Rip Ride Rockit does have ripple effects in other areas of the park, because if they do end up doing Rip Ride Rockit's replacement to Fast and Furious, that means more than likely that Fast and Furious Supercharged is going away. That means that they're not going to have two Fast and Furious properties in the same park. That means that one undoubtedly would be on borrowed time and be replaced very soon. If it's not Fast and Furious, let's say it is Ghostbusters, that means that Fast and Furious Supercharged may be safe for now, although I don't think that ride is going to be around for another decade or so. But if it's not Fast and Furious, that means there would be a little bit more speculation as to what is going to happen with Supercharged, what is going to happen with Fast and Furious in the parks, and everything that goes with that. And also, if they do Ghostbusters here, that would be a pretty good indication that they're going to do more retro-themed rides, because I don't think Ghostbusters would be the only retro ride they would do, because I do think Back to the Future has been more of a headlining thing when it comes to the retro properties. Again, look at Universal Studios Hollywood with Fan Fest, look at the merchandise and the Mega Movie Parade. Back to the Future is one of the most popular things that they currently have in the parks in terms of merchandise and different fan offerings that they have. So I think either way, whether it is Fast and Furious, whether it isn't Fast and Furious, it could give us some indication about other things coming to the parks as well. So I think there's a decent chance that this could be a Ghostbusters roller coaster coming to Universal Studios Florida. Personally speaking, I would be all for this. I've been talking about over many different videos that I'm a big fan of these nostalgic properties, these retro properties. Back to the Future is one of, it's my wife's favorite movie. It's one of my favorite movies. Ghostbusters, these other ones have been featured in the parks, Halloween Horror Nights, parades, shows, different things of that nature. And the next step in that is dedicated attractions to these retro properties. And given what they've shown with the Universal Studios UK park, obviously Universal's not afraid to put it in the parks that we've seen. So it would make sense in Universal Studios Florida to pay homage to some of these. I think if they did do Ghostbusters and a Back to the Future ride as these retro property, new attractions in the park, and would fit very well into Universal Studios Florida and what they do, and really paying, again, the history and homage of the park and what used to be there. And I do think if you get Ghostbusters here, I think there's a really good chance that Back to the Future does come back in some way into the parks, which I think would be another one that would be a fantastic thing. Because I also don't think they would just put it in the UK only. If you're going to put Back to the Future in the UK, I also think it makes a lot of sense to put it in Universal Studios Florida or the domestic parks. I think that would make tons of sense. And we do know that Universal has already said they have a slew of new things coming to the existing parks outside of Epic Universe, Universal Studios Florida, and Islands of Adventure. They've also said they have plans for expansion pads and expansion areas at Epic Universe as well. But obviously Rip Ride Rockit is the first announcement of new things coming to the parks since Epic Universe. But it could be the first of a few announcements of some retro-themed properties coming to the parks. I think it would go over great with the fan base. I think these would be insanely popular attractions in the park, and I think it would be actually prove as well you don't have to do everything off of modern IPs. You could revitalize older IPs that still have a fan base and give them new life in your parks.
I rest my case.
Oh, that got me.
So obviously this is a little rumory. This could be, reading between the lines more than what they're intending. But I think when you look at the timing of this, the timing of the post there that they had on Twitter X, the Mega Movie Parade, everything they're doing in Universal Hollywood Fan Fest, you look at overseas with Universal UK Park, a lot of these things are heavily, heavily influenced with retro properties that they're doing there. And I don't see any reason as to why they wouldn't also expand that to the Universal Studios parks as well. But before we go, speaking about the roller coaster that will replace Rip Ride Rockit, I think this is the one I talked about in my previous video about the layout track here that would fit the footprint of where Rip Ride Rockit is. And I think this is the coaster here that they have a little test footage of. And if you look at the layout of this and the footprint of it, I think more than likely this would be the ride that would replace Rip Ride Rockit. That footprint almost seems like it was tailor-made for Rip Ride Rockit. Very narrow, very long, has that same launch angle right there. Very similar as well to Rip Ride Rockit. So if you're looking to replace it, but kind of pay a little homage to it with that same vertical climb there, this coaster would make a lot of sense to do. And obviously being Intamin, Universal has had a really good relationship with them. They're the company that's been behind Hagrid's, that's been behind Hiccup's Wing Gliders. So Universal has a very good relationship with them, and their coasters are very well regarded. So it makes a lot of sense. And we do know it is going to be an Intamin roller coaster. We just don't know which one. But I think looking at this one, it makes a lot of sense that this would be the coaster that would replace it. I'll put a link to this in the description, so if you guys want to go check that out, see what you think about it. But I do think in terms of what could be replacing it, I do think it could be this one. So lots of exciting things happening at Universal. Obviously, Epic Universe is now open. That brand new park is there, and more things coming to the Universal Studios parks. Lots of speculation. And I'm very curious as to what is going to replace this and what we may hear in the very near future about new things coming to the Universal Studios parks. But when I find out more things about it, I will be sure to talk about it on here. By the way, that's going to be it, though, for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, do you think the signage on the construction walls indicate that Ghostbusters is going to be replacing Rip Ride Rockit, or do you think it's going to be some other property? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.